Hi there, and welcome to another episode on the Let's Talk Wellness with Shal podcast. My name is Shalini, and the vision of this podcast is to empower you with knowledge on wellness and self care from my knowledge and from global practitioners around the world. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Elisha Cicirelli on a very important topic. Elisha is a scientist turned MCAS and autoimmune health coach. After facing mysterious health challenges in 2013 and finding limited help through traditional medicine, she became her own healing experiment. Initial efforts with diet and supplements fell short until she discovered the connection between trauma, nervous system, dysregulation, and chronic illness. In 2019, Alicia founded Live Bravely to share her healing journey and five-part framework through digital guides and a self-guided course. Hi, Alicia. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I would love for you to, start off by sharing a bit about your wellness journey and kind of what brought you here today to this special topic around the nervous system and grief and trauma. Just a little, context will definitely help the audience.
Sure. Yeah, so thank you for that nice introduction. Yeah, so like you mentioned in my introduction, initially when I was diagnosed, just started reading a lot because I thought no one could really help me, it seemed, to figure out why I was so sick. And the doctors just told me to take lots of supplements and, medication, and maybe you could take a supplement or whatever. And I just remember thinking like, but I was 33 at the time. What am I going to do the rest of my life? This is like not a long-term plan for me just to take this medication and supplements. And I was very confused as to why I was sick because the way my symptoms came on was I was basically fine, which I mean is like no symptoms a week before that. And then all of a sudden I developed these strange, I had angioedema and hives. So my lips would randomly start swelling up and I developed all these food sensitivities. And I just remember thinking like there has to be a reason. This doesn't make sense to me. And had already been working with an acupuncturist, and I was really fortunate. I already had somebody that was familiar with the wellness and maybe some more alternative approach. And she typically would see a lot of people with chronic illness, so she is in the space, which is great to have that already as a resource. Initially, I spent a lot of time on my diet because everything I had been reading about, and different MDs wrote books on chronic illness, and oh, you just do this diet and it helps. And I did all of that, even the AIP diet. And I joke, I'm like, I'm a scientist, I can follow a protocol. But I just remember being so frustrated because after almost 4 years of that, I was at my absolute sickest. And I remember my husband saying, he's like, I don't think it's your diet. And I remember thinking, you can't, because I had nothing else to try. I didn't know what else to do. I was on the super, super restrictive AIP diet. I also had salicylate sensitivity, oxalate. It was very, very strict just because I couldn't tolerate a lot of different types of foods, unfortunately. And I didn't know what else to try. And I had found there was one woman who was a CNN reporter. Her name was Yasmina, and she had a website and a newsletter. And so I really valued her information she shared. And she had a webinar. And I remember I purchased the webinars like $99. And we'd already spent thousands of dollars on all these practitioners. And, like a lot of people can relate to. And my husband looked at me like, oh, here we go again, and I was like, no, I just have a feeling that this is gonna help. And luckily I listened to my intuition on that one.
Mhm.
And she recommended this book called The Last Best Cure, which I highly recommend for anybody who's struggling with chronic illness. The Last Best Cure. Donna Jackson Nakasawa is the author. And in the book, she talks about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And I remember I was reading the book and, she's talking about her journey with her illness and she was struggling to be able to go up the stairs in their home and all these things. And she mentioned ACEs. And I literally just stopped and I literally just had to pause because I was so stunned. I'd never heard about ACEs. None of the practitioners I had seen, over 10 of them, no one literally had ever mentioned it. This is back in 2013. And I was like, that's it. That's why I'm sick. Because I had experienced a lot of bullying, specifically when I was younger, and some other things like many of us do in childhood. And I had been the person that always tried to eat healthy and exercise and do all the things they tell you to do, which is why I felt so blindsided by, like many of us do, by when you have chronic health. It's like, wait a minute, I'm doing all the things they tell you you're supposed to do. What's going on? And then when the doctors don't have any answers, it's like, what?
Yeah.
And I remember in this book also, she talked about another word that I'm guessing people listening, their doctors are not going to know this word. This is an important word also. Psychoneuroimmunology. So this is a whole area of science that was discovered by Dr. Candace Pert in the early 80s. And she wrote a book called Molecules of Emotion. And what this area of science talks about is how the brain, nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system, so our hormones, are all interconnected.
Yeah.
So if you, I'm sure we'll get into this, are living in a chronic high stress fight flight response, that's going to have an impact on your immune system and on your hormones. And I remember just reading that and going like, this explains more than these two things in this book. Reading this, I was like, I actually have a plan, because in the book she talks about her journey to try to heal. And I just was like, this, I just knew deep down there was something to this. And so I
Mm.
continued on the journey, read her follow-up book, Childhood Disrupted, read some other things, and then eventually started working with a really good therapist a few months later. And shortly after, probably 6 to 8 weeks after working with a really amazing trauma-informed therapist, I could tell that my body felt less reactive, like
Mm.
overall, even though I had been really working through, for the first time in my life, learning how to feel any sort of emotions. Because when I was sick, I had become like so terrified of my body because it would have these random reactions of my face swelling, my lips, and hives on my arms. And it just felt like it just never played by the rules. It just did whatever it wanted all the time. And that was really traumatizing too, to be like not knowing when you're going to have a flare or you're at work or whatever. And allowing myself to actually, for a long time, I hadn't allowed myself to feel anything. I didn't know how to really. I was afraid to cry even. I was so scared really of the reactions I was having. And the irony was that was exactly what I needed to do, was to work through and learn to feel emotions and to be able to give a voice to things. And as I did that, and I would go every Saturday and drive 45 minutes there because she was one of the only ones I could find in where we lived. Um, I could tell I started to feel better. And after about 8 weeks, I remember one day, and people maybe can relate if they have food sensitivities. So for me, my food sensitivities basically developed overnight. So all of a sudden, I couldn't eat oranges, any berries, any high histamine foods. Basically, I would get angioedema. And I remember I was feeling pretty good. And I thought, let me just see if I can eat a blueberry. And it sounds like the most ridiculous thing, but that's where I was at. That's how sensitive my body was that I didn't even know if I could eat one blueberry without going into a full reaction.
Wow.
And I thought, okay. And I thought, you know what? I'll just try. We're not going to go into this with like a big plan. If okay. If it doesn't, I thought, you know what? If my lips start swelling, it was like the weekend and I was like, whatever. Hopefully by Monday it looks normal again. Like, because it could take days sometimes. And I remember I ate the blueberry. So this is about after 8 weeks of doing a really, really working in therapy. And I waited like a minute or two and I was like, I feel fine. Okay. 10 minutes later, I was like, feel fine. Okay. Half hour later, I was like, still nothing. And like an hour, 2 hours later, I was like, oh my gosh. I think I actually started crying
Yep.
because I
Wow.
had finally found something that seemed to be helping me.
Mm. Wow. It's
And
like,
I was,
sorry, keep going.
no, and I just remember thinking like, I have something, because the way I would often think of it is like before that I'd had this pile of keys that I was kept trying the lock and none of them would open the door. And there was like one key left. And like I tried it and it worked. And like, thank God. And that was my going forward. I used that just as like my guiding, like basically like, okay, therapy, working with your therapist, working with her seems to work, and just stay on this path because this seems to be doing something to help your body and nothing else seemed to be. So like just stay with that. And that was really how I got started. And then after about 6 months later, I remember thinking, having this realization, which I'm sure we can get into this more around, am I a sick person anymore? Because before that, I never like like really thought of myself like that. But then I started to realize I looked at my life through this lens of like, I don't know, can we go on vacation? What if I have a reaction? I don't know, can we do that? I don't know, you know. And after 6 months of working in therapy, my body started feeling better. I was like, I haven't been thinking about being sick because I'm not really having any symptoms anymore. And that was a whole nother transformation where it was like, can I re-enter life? Like, you know, like get back on the highway again with like being like, all right, I'm ready. And so that took some adjusting too, really. I mean, it kind of surprised me that it did. But yeah, so then in 2019, we moved in 2018. And then 2019, I founded Live Bravely. I just felt like I couldn't, with what I had learned, it just felt so unfair to not share with other people because I just felt that I'm sure there were other people who could benefit from from what I've learned, and hopefully it helps saves them years, like the 4 years I spent just focused on my diet that I look back and go, ugh, you know, but you know, hopefully it saves some other people time. So
Got it. So I think what I'm really hearing you say is there is so much about just grief, trauma, childhood, versus,
mhm,
memories or experiences, all of that, which can manifest in your body in so many different ways. And most people don't even realize that because they all think, oh, wow, I'm eating the healthiest food, I'm working out, I'm doing everything right. So what is it that I'm missing? So I feel
yes,
like there's this whole nervous system knows something, right, that is showing
no,
up, and we just need the awareness, I think, and that education to realize that there's something more.
totally, yeah.
Yeah,
And without that book, I don't think I would. I don't know how I would have found out. I mean, I guess hopefully at some point I would have, but I didn't even know because none of the stuff I had been reading had ever mentioned any of this stuff. So,
got it.
you
Got
know,
it. Yep. Yep. Wow. And then I know I touched on this MCAS, and you're an autoimmune coach. What exactly does that mean? What is MCAS?
so it can be a lot of, I'll just talk specifically about my own symptoms, and it's kind of mast cell activation syndrome is what I likely had. I was never formally diagnosed because it was a year and a half wait list for me to actually see a practitioner who was one of the, I think, three experts in the United States in this, apparently. So this is back in 2013. There's a lot more awareness around it now. But basically, and I think there's still question, is it really autoimmune? Is it not? And I'm like, well, basically I was reactive to like everything. So I mean, to me, that seems like autoimmune. I mean, like, it wasn't just like, oh, my joints or it was like, no, like I literally feel like even changes in my hormones. It was like any sort of changes that were almost like too much for my body to handle, it would
Mm,
result in a reaction. So times in my cycle, certain times, specifically mid-cycle, very, very reactive.
mm.
Foods. Then I eventually learned certain people.
Ah,
And so I started to uncover layers to things that I was like, oh, that's interesting. But for me, some people have like heart related things, specifically around their heart rate. For most people, I believe it's angioedema and they'll have hives or angioedema
times.
reactions. It's like unexplained reacting to things. Some people's chemical sensitivities. I had a lot of light sensitivity also, like where inside the lights inside would just really bother, like horrible headache. Now it makes a lot more sense. I understand more brain wise what was happening at that point. But at the time, it's just like you become hypersensitive and reactive to a lot of things. And it can manifest different ways of different people. But generally that's kind of, it's like the immune system has just kind of gone off the rails, and it thinks it needs to protect you from almost anything. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
I think, yeah, I think the other question I have is kind of related, but it's like, you know, how does a fight, flight, freeze states essentially kind of show up in the body, right? I mean, beyond just, yeah, I'm anxious, I'm tired, I'm
Sure.
not feeling very good, right? How does it manifest, I
Yeah,
guess?
and I guess I should say too that to make sense, to kind of connect these points. So after doing a lot of this work in therapy, I started to recognize I had been living in a fight flight response since I was probably a baby. Like, because I remember at like age 5 having chronic stomach aches because I was getting bullied on the bus on the way to school.
Uh,
And so the more I learn about this, and I was reading something yesterday about how I didn't realize that I believe it's even in utero to early age, like 5 or 6, that's a really crucial time for the nervous system. And so if you're exposed to high levels of stress during that time, the best way I can describe it is it's kind of like a piano that is not really tuned the way it needs to be. And so it's kind of out of tune. And so then as life goes on, you're continuing to expose, they call it your vagal tone or your vagus nerve that helps move the body in a fight flight response. It's already more prone to being in a fight flight response because of
uh,
early life experiences. And so I recognized after, like I said, therapy, that that was totally me. I mean,
yeah.
and also if our caregivers, this kind of gets into ACEs we talked about briefly, struggle with anxiety, depression, those types of things, we
Mm,
are attuning to that. Like we're looking at that. So if you have somebody who's really, anxious or whatever, like you're thinking that's normal to be that
mm,
anxious.
mm. Right.
And so your nervous system believes that that's kind of where the baseline is. So
Mm,
at a young age, you can see how you're already more prone to that. And then when we go through things later in life, like Bessel van der Kolk says, a body keeps a score. It's at some point, I describe it, the volcano just blows. It's like too much. And for me, the last straw in my 30s was we had gone through 3 years of fertility challenges. And that was right before I started, like days before I started with angioedema. So like that was something that I just felt like to share some background around how early in life that can affect you. And then what it can show up like for people is the way I like to describe it is I think about like if you've just taken a really good yoga class and you feel like really grounded and sometimes I don't know about you, but after I take that class, I was like, whoa, I was really in a fight flight response before this. Because I always felt hurried. I felt, fight flight is fighting. You feel more angry or irritated, or you want to run, right?
yep,
Freeze is you just feel exhausted and you just like shut down and everything feels like it's too much and you just want to pull the covers over your head and like go back to sleep. And then fawn is another one people talk about around people pleasing and things like that. But when I think of fight flight, it's just you as you start to build more awareness, you can tell, oh wow, I feel really irritated right now. I don't feel like I have a lot of capacity to handle anything. Everything seems like it's annoying me, you know.
uh,
Um, and freeze is kind of just like I just can't listen to any of this, and I just don't even. I can't even right now. And that's the best way I can describe it. That just different ways you can build some awareness around. If you feel a lot of urgency, you have to respond to that email. You have to do that project. Like that's a fight flight response.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess on that related kind of way in her, right? So what would be some tips? I mean, how can people, manage some of these emotions?
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly. I mean, we all live in a world where there's a lot going on, obviously, with everything. I will say for myself, doing a daily practice that is grounding as much as I can is crucial because we have a 5-year-old daughter who's very keeps me on my toes, and I need to have something that brings me back to a healthy baseline because sometimes we can get off and you don't even know for days, where you're up there and you don't even know it. And then, you take that yoga class, you do the meditation, you whatever, take that Epsom salt bath, a grounding sheet. I bought one, which I don't know if you love it. Um, and where it helps you realize like, whoa, I
Yeah.
I was definitely, and they call it sympathetic. I was definitely in a sympathetic activation, like where I was really activated. And so that's what I recommend for people is finding every day, if you can, 20 minutes of just allowing yourself to come down. And when I worked at the job I was at before in the biotech, because it was a very stressful job, I would actually go into the bathroom and do breathing exercises to calm my body because I could feel that I was so it was not, I knew it wasn't good for my health, like that being in that. And so that's something I would do, like box breathing, like 4 in, 4 hold, and then I do long 8 exhale. Um, those were tips that I would do until I could quit my job and do something different. But like, first it's recognizing that you're in a fight flight response or that your body, is not feeling great. And then it's just making a choice to try to do something gentle, I would say, with
Mhm.
yourself that can just be soothing to the body. Whatever that looks like, that's for you.
Got it. Got it. And then, of course, I mean, you founded Live Bravely and you talk about brave healing. Can you, tell the audience a bit about what that actually means and kind of what's your mission and what do you do?
Yeah. So as we talked about with the trauma stuff, the ACEs, that piece, as I, learned on my own journey and other people, as I started working with people, recognizing that first, I should say, if you have chronic illness, that in itself is traumatic because our lives have been completely changed. For many of us, we feel we have to hide it because you want to still hold your job. You don't know how much you can share with your coworkers because you don't know if they're not going to give you a project or whatever, right? Like, oh, can they handle being, because I was a project manager, can you handle project management if you've got this going on or whatever? And that in itself can be so hard. And family members, you don't know how much to share. So there's that layer, I would say. And then once people start recognizing, wow, what am I going to have to do to try to get better here? That takes a lot of bravery, I feel like, and to be really honest with yourself around, and I say this, no criticism, just around areas in your life that just aren't working for you, frankly. Like they're just not. They're not conducive to your healing. They're not, and sometimes we have to have some tough conversations with other people and ourselves around just being like really honest because a
Yep.
lot of times we want to be like, oh, it's not that bad, like, oh, I can handle that extra project or I can handle whatever, and then having to be like real and be like, no, actually, I told my husband this. I said, I got nothing in the tank, right? Like, at the end of the day, I don't want to have zero left in the tank. I need more than I need like 20% at least. And so being really brave around whether it's going to therapy and working through some hard stuff that you've never wanted to talk about or work through, but like that it's important to your health, or setting a boundary with somebody who's really difficult, but it's important for your health, or any of these things. It
Exactly.
takes bravery. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So what do you work with, I mean, your clients specifically?
Yeah. So I have obviously my course and then my guides. And so what I have found, and some people ask, well, have you worked, as I work with people with Crohn's or whatever? And what I find is kind of the traditional medicine model is just looking at the symptoms. But what I've found consistently is digging a lot deeper than that. And it's not necessarily as much the symptoms, it's more these other things that we've been talking about. So for everyone, it's going to maybe manifest a little bit differently. Like we talked about with MCAS, like, oh, this person has heart issues and this person has highs, but like there's the same like underlying things going on. And I found with the people who have significantly improved or have healed, they have done a similar approach or have done what I've basically recommended, maybe independently, they found this themselves. And so as a scientist, that's something I found super interesting is like different friends I've made online, for example, in the different spaces, and you get to talk to people and you're like, oh my gosh, me too. Like, yeah, yeah, working through the trauma stuff was so crucial, or how I speak to myself, the self-compassion so important, or setting boundaries, and all of these pieces are what also really help them with their health. So just wanted to mention that. So yes, yeah, we have different diagnoses, but it's more, I would say, the deeper things that are often not discussed at the doctor or the practitioner's office that are, I find, more crucial and more impactful for people's healing.
Got it. So more again, coming back to the nervous system, the
Yes.
emotions, which
Mhm.
are, I almost feel like the subtle layer, which what manifests in the physical body, if you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So got it. Got it. So I think as we kind of, just summarize all of this, I think I know you already touched a bit upon some of the tips or what you would recommend, right? But maybe if you just had to kind of summarize, what are the three things that you would want to just give to the audience in terms of here are some tools, right? Just to even, I don't know, if you're going through some of these bad emotions and roller coasters in your life, right? What are the three things they should do?
Sure. I'll try to think of just three. Um, Number one, go buy a journal somewhere, whatever, $5 somewhere, and just allow yourself to actually write your emotions and how you feel, right? No one needs to read it. Spend like 15 to 20 minutes and let yourself get it out. That in itself can be very helpful as a really good starting place. Let yourself have some Kleenexes if you need, like, you know, please start with that because we often have so much bottled up inside of us. And as we let it, it's like, whoa, I didn't realize. And just putting it on paper
Hmm.
helps our body not and our brain not be constantly like it's going in the background otherwise, right? So get that out. That would be one thing. The second thing I would recommend is starting to, you can put this in the same journal if you want, start to track when you have flares, if you're someone with that type of symptoms, and just kind of go as a scientist, again, not having any sort of, but just start to notice what's going on when you have a flare. Are there certain people that you just interacted with? Did you just have a difficult conversation with somebody? Did you just spend an hour on the phone with like, and just start to notice because a lot of times I was this way, want to deny that that could be impacting our health. But at some point, when you've got it all written out and you got the data points, you kind of have to believe them. And that was me. After like 3 months of it, I was like, okay, kind of can't deny this anymore. So, anyway, that's the second thing I would say. So, get your journal, start doing your journaling. Second thing I would recommend is start just building some awareness, not judgmentally, just, that's interesting. I seem to flare when I'm in this situation.
Yep.
Third thing I would recommend is start to notice also your internal dialogue,
Hmm.
how you speak to yourself when you're having a flare. When whatever you don't feel great and you know you can't go to work today, what is the language that you use with yourself? So A, obviously we want to be kind to ourselves, but B, if we're using very critical language, which is a common theme I see with people with chronic illness, because that was totally me, by the way, because we're typically high achievers that,
Yep.
because we work really hard and push through. And the reason that's important, besides obviously we want to be kind to ourselves, but the second reason is that also puts the body in a higher stress fight flight response if you're being really critical to yourself.
Yep.
So if you listen, you know that you don't want to be stuck there. Like you want to move
Yes.
back into rest and digest mode. And you want to be able to move between those states easily. And so the third thing is start noticing how you speak to yourself and just challenge the, oh, you're always sick. Okay, challenge that with, you know what? You're going through a lot right now in your life. And I'm so sorry you feel like crap today. Speaking like how you'd want a kind friend or somebody that was kind to speak to you instead. So that's the third thing I'd recommend. And honestly, I think if people did those, that would help. I mean, that would have helped me a lot when I was really sick, definitely.
Got it. No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I know it's, gosh, we're living at this age and time where it's all about burnout and stress. And I mean, everything's at kind of the super high, right? Especially when I talk to a lot of clients around yoga or breath work, right? I mean, the common theme is I'm stressed out or I'm burnt out, right? So I think, I mean, I love these tips because a way to express all of those emotions is definitely journaling, right? Because I know when you speak to somebody, you always feel like maybe you're going to be judged and all of it,
Yeah.
right? But at least
Yeah.
here, you're just doing it for yourself. You're just kind of putting everything out without anybody else having to read it, or you don't have to share it with anyone. But it's just a way to, again, get it out of your system and really.
Yes.
So, no, I totally agree with a lot of those tips that you just shared. So, yeah, thank you. Well, Elisha, I really appreciate this conversation and the time you took to
Yeah.
talk through all of this with us. And if you want to just share with the audience where they can find you on social media, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm at Bravely Together, or sorry, I'm at Bravely Together, and then bravelytogether.com also is my website. So, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I appreciate this conversation. And this will be aired in full. Episode will be shared on Let's Talk Wellness with Shal on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye bye.